In today's video, I'm going to talk about prescription drug withdrawal and increased stress sensitivity, who experiences it, and how to manage it. Stay tuned, I think you'll find this useful. Hello there everyone and welcome back to The Lovely Grind. I'm Michael Preby and my webpage is lovelygrind.com. That's where you can find information to sign up for my coaching, register for my courses, or just go there and browse my content and read more blog posts. I welcome you back to my YouTube channel and to today's video, which is about prescription drug withdrawal, antidepressant, benzo withdrawal namely, and increased stress sensitivity. If you're someone who's tapering these medications or is already off and working through an ongoing healing process, then you might have noticed that at times you feel overwhelmingly stressed, and the reaction in your body and in your mind to stressful situations doesn't always line up as far as what's in front of you and the actual situations you're experiencing. It seems so much more intense than it ought to be and than it used to be. Well, the good news is it's not just you. This is a very common effect of these medications when you're reducing them or when you get off them and you're going through withdrawal. It's a very common withdrawal symptom, this increased stress sensitivity. It's something that I experienced myself after I got off Paxil and Xanax after more than a dozen years' use. And it's something I see over and over and over again as I coach others who are tapering these medications and working through a healing process. Now, there's a lot of individual experiences and variables in a withdrawal process. Healing in many respects is an individual process, but there's also a lot of commonalities regarding what people might experience when they're reducing or getting off of these medications. And two of the really big common ones I've noticed after years and years of coaching people from all over the world are these. One, there's increased fear of anything, everything, nothing. There's just increased fear levels, and that can be very disruptive and very confusing for an individual. And then two, there's increased stress sensitivity and a decreased resiliency in the face of life stresses. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, is that second one. So if you're someone who's tapering these meds or has already gotten off them and is working through a healing process, maybe you've noticed that stress seems to affect you differently than in the past. Okay, so maybe something that was minorly stressful before you began this tapering or healing process now seems like an emergency, and your body and mind are just getting ramped up and pumped with stress hormones, and you're experiencing all sorts of physical symptoms and discomfort when what you experienced really wasn't that big of a deal. Maybe it was someone cutting you off in traffic, or someone saying an unkind word to you on the telephone or out in public, or some minor disagreement with a loved one, or some email that you opened up from work and that was a request for something you weren't expecting. Whatever it is, in the past, these would have been relatively minor events, and perhaps they would have annoyed you, maybe caused some feelings of stress, but then you would have calmed down rather quickly and dealt with them and gotten over them. But now maybe you just can't forget about them, and your body and mind get so worked up. So that's one of the ways the stress sensitivity plays out, is an increased initial reaction to things that used to seem minor. They now seem like crises sometimes. You know, one anecdote I can share personally regarding this is I can remember as I was relatively fresh off the medications and still working through a healing process, I was given the task of cooking my famous chicken and wild rice soup for Thanksgiving. And we had my family over, my parents, brothers, sister-in-law, my wife's parents. They were in from Argentina, and I was cooking this soup for everyone. And I accidentally read the black pepper in the recipe as tablespoons rather than teaspoons. So I put a whole bunch of black pepper in this soup recipe that I had spent so much time preparing up to that point. Well, I thought it was absolutely ruined, and not only that the soup was ruined, but maybe that the day was ruined, and I felt embarrassed and so frustrated. At the end of the day, obviously was not a great big deal. We ended up adding like more cream to it, I believe. Went to the store and got more half and half and added that to this recipe, and everything was fine and dandy in the end. Crisis averted. Crisis never really there in the first place, but it just felt like such a major deal to me at the time. And that's just one of many relatively minor things that got me so worked up. Common interpersonal interactions in the workplace. I can remember would have my back so tense and my abdomen feeling perpetually tense, and everything just felt like such a big deal when it wasn't. And that's one of the ways the stress sensitivity shows itself, is those initial reactions to things that ought to be minor, they seem very major. Another way this shows itself is that we have an amplified stress reaction to even stressful thoughts or fearful thoughts, or things we might see in a movie or see in a video on YouTube or read in a book, and we just can't seem to forget about this one thing, and all of a sudden these stress reactions are pumping again through our body with such intensity, simply because we had a disturbing thought or something that bothered us was seen or read or listened to. Another thing that might happen is it might take our bodies longer to calm down after a stressful event. So whereas when we're at a normal state of balance and resilience, we can feel the anxiety and the stress, and then it peaks, and then it calms down, and we're balanced again, and we move on with our lives. When we're tapering or working through this withdrawal healing process, we experiencing something that's stressful, we don't seem to calm down quite so fast. And it just takes so much out of us, and it might take hours or even days to calm down, whereas before it would have taken, maybe a matter of minutes or an hour or two. And one final way that you might notice this increased stress sensitivity as you're going through this process is that it is easier to reach a point of stress overload or overwhelm or feelings of burnout than it was before. So if you experience one or two or three things in a row that are stressful, you might feel as if all your reserves are just depleted. Or after one normal week of work, if you're still working right now, you go through all these little things during the course of the week, the emails, the meetings, the interactions, the potential disagreements or difficult clients, and you feel like you've just run a gamut of 1,000 different stressful events, and you almost feel burnt out each evening or on each Friday evening after working 4 or 5 days in the week. The good news, it's not just you. I mean, this is, again, one of the most common experiences as a person's working through a tapering and withdrawal healing process, is this increased stress sensitivity as the nervous system's still finding a way to balance itself out and get used to dealing with stress with less and less of, or with none of the medications in the picture. There's a little bit of a learning curve, and while the transition's happening from medication to lower and then no medication, there's this stress sensitivity. So what are some ways that a person can work with themselves and help themselves as you're experiencing this stress sensitivity symptom? Well, we can't exactly get rid of all stress in life. We all have personal and perhaps professional responsibilities, and those are always going to come with some stress. And there's always going to be some unforeseen challenges in the course of any given week in our lives. So the goal isn't to eliminate all stress and any feelings of stress, but we can try to mitigate and manage stress as possible. And a couple of the ways we can do it are these. One is going to be to try to eliminate unnecessary causes of stress in our life and or stressful situations that bring us little benefit. And I'll talk through each of those for a moment. The first, an unnecessary source of stress. What would some examples be? Well, putting ourselves into, let's say, a conversation with an acquaintance or even a friend who seems toxic, or the relationship's one-sided, or they're always argumentative, but yet we pick up the phone every single time they call or reply to the text every single time they text. It's unnecessary. provides us little to no benefit, but provides us with a lot of stress that we don't need and don't have the extra reserves to handle. Better to take a step back from such interactions if you can. Another one might be saying yes to things that we don't really need to be at. So a wedding or a graduation or a birthday celebration for people whom we only know casually, for people who might not even notice if we're there anyway. So I would say those sorts of commitments, we have to learn how to say no to them and then not fret about it internally, because we know that we're declining the invitation for the sake of our own health and wellness at present time. Another example of unnecessary stress or stress that might come with few benefits would be looking at information online, watching videos and so forth that repeatedly stress us, and you walk away feeling worse than you did before, but yet you keep scrolling and scrolling. So, try to curb that habit. That's putting a stress on your body and your mind to see things that might frighten you or, create anxiety in you over and over. Try to limit that. On the flip side, there are stressful things that are either necessary or they come with benefit. So maybe we can skip a birthday party for a coworker's spouse, but we probably don't want to skip a birthday party for our own spouse. Try that one. Or we don't want to skip a birthday party for our child or a wedding of our child and so forth. Even though those things might be stressful, both leading up to it and then getting through it with all the energy one has to put out to make small talk and coordinate things, there's a benefit there and a responsibility. And you don't want to look back 3 or 4 years and think, oh, why did I say no to that thing when it was so important to the people I love? Another example of a stressful commitment that might bring benefit, though, and would be worth it, would be like going on little getaways with your family, whether it's for an evening or for a couple of days. You might initially be nervous about shaking up your routines or sleeping in a hotel bed or at a cottage or whatever it is, or traveling for hours in a plane or a car. However, what comes with that is also fresh ideas and scenery in front of your eyes, something that's not just the same 4 walls you're stuck in at home thinking about withdrawal. You are with the emotional support of people who love you. Maybe you're engaged with activities that take you outside of your worries for a while. And you create some memories that you look back on, and even if that period of time was difficult because of symptoms, there's also some good memories you'll look back at, so that all that time spent tapering or working through healing isn't just seen as a traumatic experience. There's good memories right alongside. Also, you proved to yourself you can do it. So that's an example of something that might carry stress, but that carries benefit as well, and that benefit outweighs the stress. Obviously, professional life. Again, if it's providing you with an income, you're taking care of your family, even if it's taking a lot out of you, it's still worth it to try to keep working if you can. Not just for financial reasons, though, but because it forces you to get outside the house or put your focus somewhere that isn't withdrawal related, even for a small amount of time. And again, it reminds you that you can do it. So you keep one foot in the real world, so to speak, even as you're experiencing this stress. So those are 2 good rules of thumb. If something is totally unnecessary or mostly unnecessary and or doesn't come with a large benefit to you or your loved ones, then perhaps consider saying no to it. Finally, right alongside the efforts to mitigate stress and to reduce or eliminate unnecessary or unbeneficial sources of stress as you're working through a healing process, is going to be stress management techniques. So you begin to research and practice strategies and lifestyle tweaks that help your body to calm down after stressful periods, and also help your body to build a greater resilience physiologically and psychologically in the face of stress. So meditation might do that for some people. It actually does that for a lot of people. It just depends whether or not it's working for you at this particular time. Some people find it a little difficult to sit down for a prolonged period of time and meditate as they're working through this healing process. But I tell you what, there's even 3 and 5 minute guided meditations on YouTube that are beneficial for stress relief and clearing the head and calming the system down. And I have some in my support and success area too, short meditations. Just little bite-sized things you can do for 2 or 4 minutes at a time, and they help to just clear the head and calm the mind and calm the body after something stressful, which again could be a interpersonal problem, could be a professional problem, could be even a thought or something you read online or whatever. Physical exercise is going to be a huge one. It's been proven to be nature's most effective natural antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication, so to speak. So it is going to help a person calm down after a stressful event or a stressful day, and it's also going to help build up a systemic resilience so that if you're working out consistently and a stressful event arises, your body doesn't get so worked up and it recovers more quickly. Regular cardiovascular exercise has been shown to just give increased access to natural serotonin and GABA, the same neurochemicals that these medications try to manipulate artificially. And that helps to increase feelings of well-being and calm. And then there's the access it gives to endorphins, which are like nature's painkillers. So it just all adds up to being in your best interest to try to exercise in some form or fashion as you're working through this healing process and beyond. Again, if you're experiencing stress sensitivity in this process, it's not just you. It's common and it can be a challenge, but there are ways to work with yourself so that it's a little easier and that stress doesn't seem quite so overwhelming. And as always, the best news is that with time and self-care, as you continue to progress in this healing process, you become more resilient in the face of stress and your system becomes more balanced and strengthened, and you're better able to react to things and tackle things, and rather than having everything seem so confusing and challenging at times. My name is Michael Preby. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you did, click thumbs up and subscribe. I invite you again to go to lovelygrind.com, check out information about my coaching or courses, read my blog posts, and until next time, I encourage you to take care of yourself and your dreams.